Hey everyone, today I want to share a story with you, a story I truly believe will touch your heart about a man and his dog. This is the tale of William and Lucky. In the rolling hills of rural Wyoming, where the wind whispers through endless fields and cottonwoods sway gently beneath the vast sky, lived a man named William. At 60 years old, William wore his years like a faded denim jacket worn familiar and full of stories. His face was etched with the lines of time, his silver hair perpetually tousled by the prairie wind. His entire life had been tethered to this small plot of land, raising a few goats, growing potatoes, carrots, and tomatoes in his humble garden. Behind his log cabin, a row of apple trees bloomed each spring with pale pink blossoms, their scent a quiet promise of hope. William's wife, his one true love, had passed away years ago. His only son had long since moved to a bustling city on the East Coast. Building his own life with a family and children William only saw in pictures. Calls grew fewer, visits even less so. But William never complained. He'd chosen this quiet life, clinging to the memories of a love that still echoed within the walls of his old home. Yet deep down in the quiet hours of early morning, or just before the sun dipped behind the hills, a dull ache remained. A silent longing, not for noise or excitement, but for companionship. Someone or something to walk with him through the final chapters of his life. He'd often sit on his porch, gazing out at the expansive fields, and sometimes he'd wish for the cheerful bark of a dog or a wagging tail, eagerly awaiting his return. On a still Wednesday morning in early October, the leaves already turning and the air carrying autumn's first chill, William saw it for the first time. The dog had been wandering for days, leaving miles behind. Hungry, exhausted, and with an injured leg, every step was an effort. It had seen cars whiz by warm houses, but no one had stopped, until it neared William's small farm. He was mending a rotting fence post, hammer in hand, head down, when he heard a rustle in the tall grass nearby. At first he thought it was a coyote. They were common this time of year. But then he met its gaze, not wild, not fierce, just tired and full of despair. A dog, bony, its fur matted with dirt and dried grass, stood still about 20 feet from him, ears drooped, tail tucked between its legs. One front paw lifted slightly off the ground as if injured. William squinted under the brim of his wide-brimmed hat. "Well, you ain't no coyote," he mumbled, his voice low but loud enough for the dog to hear. The dog flinched at the sound of a human voice, retreating a step, ready to bolt. But William didn't advance. He simply glanced at it for a moment, then returned to his work. He knew a hurt creature needed space. "I don't have much," he said louder, hammering a nail into the rotten post, "but if you're hungry, I reckon I could spare a bit." By the time the sun dipped behind the cottonwoods, the dog was still there. Closer now, huddled in the shade, watching. William left a bowl of water and a leftover piece of cornbread on the back porch, then went inside as if nothing remarkable had happened. From the kitchen, he occasionally glanced out the window, trying to appear nonchalant, but a faint hope flickered within him. Would it eat? Would it stay? A few days later, on a cool autumn afternoon, William took his usual stroll through the pine woods behind his house. The dry pine needles crunched underfoot and the wind whispered through the tall trees. Quiet, just like every day, until he heard it. A small sound, a faint trembling whimper as if about to vanish in the wind. William stopped, listened, then followed the sound, pushing through brush, scrambling over uneven terrain, until he reached a slope where rocks and earth had recently given way. And there, wedged between two large boulders, was the stray dog, weak, unable to move. "Oh no, hang in there, little fellow," William whispered, kneeling on the ground. "I'm here. Don't give up." He began to move the rocks one by one. His old arms trembled. His breath came in ragged gasps, but he didn't stop. He strained, putting every last ounce of strength from his calloused hands into lifting the stones. "Almost got you, buddy," he muttered. Just as the dog was freed and he scooped it into his arms, a sickening crack echoed. Another large, loose slab of rock slid with a thud, pinning his leg. The pain was immediate and intense. William collapsed onto the forest floor, blood soaking his jeans. His leg was twisted at an awkward angle beneath the debris. The dog, too weak to even stand, managed to drag itself, pulling its injured leg until it rested its head against William's chest. Its small tongue gently licked his sweat and dirt-streaked face, a wordless comfort, an unspoken connection. "Well, looks like we're both stuck, huh?" William whispered, forcing a smile through the pain. "Guess we'll make it through, little guy." Hours passed. The sun set. The cold wind began to seep through the trees. Luckily, a neighbor out on his ATV came looking when William didn't return home. He found them both injured but alive. William survived but lost part of his leg. When he opened his eyes in the hospital, his voice was weak, but the first words out were, "The dog. Is he alive?" A nurse smiled, nodding. "He's alive. He's a tough one." William gave a faint nod, a small smile touching his lips, though his eyes were still hazy with pain. "Then he's the lucky one. Maybe that'll be his name." From that moment on, the stray dog was no longer nameless. He had a name, Lucky. Winter arrived early in the Wyoming hills. Cold winds snaked through the log cabin's windows and snow blanketed the old roof. Inside, William returned after weeks of hospital care on crutches, his legs shaky, his movements slow. Sometimes he needed a walker just to get around the house. But Lucky was there, waiting. No words needed. The dog, its legs still bandaged, had been cared for by a local animal rescue organization and was now reunited with its new friend. From that day on, they started over a new life, slower, quieter, but no less warm. At first, both were a bit hesitant. William practiced walking with crutches, then a prosthetic leg, each step a challenge. Lucky was still shy, sometimes flinching if William moved too quickly, but time, patience, and compassion bound them together. William began spending more time on the porch, where Lucky often curled up in the sun. He'd talk to the dog, telling stories of his farming days, of his late wife, of the dreams and loneliness that had once haunted him. Though Lucky couldn't understand the words, its sparkling eyes and gentle tail wags seemed to say it was listening. Lucky never took its eyes off William. It learned to walk slowly beside him, never getting ahead. It lay at his feet whenever he sat by the fireplace and guarded the door every night like a loyal protector. Some days William would try to walk without his cane and fall, but Lucky was always there, silently supporting him with its gaze, with its patience. It would nudge its nose into his hand, gently rub its head against him, a wordless encouragement, a reminder that he wasn't alone. One snowy evening, William looked at Lucky and murmured softly, "I lost a part of myself out in those woods, fella. But because of you, I didn't lose everything." They learned to live with each other. William learned to accept. His leg wasn't what it used to be, learned to find joy in small things and in Lucky's warm presence. Lucky learned to be a true companion, with silence, no demands, no judgment, just unconditional love. Neighbors started to notice. Some helped fix his roof. A few younger folks brought over food on weekends. They didn't say much. They just looked at William and Lucky and understood. People told stories of the old man who got hurt and the stray dog that saved him. But William would whisper whenever someone said that, "No, he saved me." When spring returned, the apple trees behind the house bloomed again. William, now often sitting quietly by the window, watched the sunlight dance on the new leaves. Life had slowed down, but each day that passed held more meaning. Beside him, Lucky lay still, its head resting against his prosthetic leg. No words needed. "I used to think my life was over," William said softly. "But it looks like I still have a final chapter to write." Lucky lifted its head onto his knee, eyes half closed as if to say, "We'll write that chapter together." Spring in Wyoming doesn't arrive with a bang. It knocks gently like an old friend, with dewdrops on the grass, the warming scent of earth after a night's rain, and the first chirps of a sparrow by the old window. William woke earlier than usual. He no longer had to fumble for his crutches every morning, now just a wooden cane and a slow, steady gait. As the first rays of sunlight streamed through the window, he placed his hand on the sill, looking out at the garden where Lucky was rolling around in the grass trying to catch a blue butterfly. William chuckled. For the first time in years, the laughter wasn't forced. That afternoon, he went to the garden. Gloves on, wide-brimmed hat in place, he slowly pulled weeds around the carrot rows. Lucky trotted beside him like a bodyguard, but not a serious one. Every few steps, it would snatch an undersized carrot and run in circles as if it had just plundered treasure. "Hey, you planning on eating my whole harvest?" William playfully scolded, but a smile tugged at the corners of his lips. Lucky turned back carrot still in its mouth tail, wagging wildly. It dropped the carrot at his feet, then lay down, head resting on William's pant leg as if apologizing or demanding a head scratch. As night fell, the two survivors stretched out by the old fireplace. William flipped through a dusty photo album while Lucky rested its head on his lap, eyes half closed as if dreaming. "She would have liked you, you know." William mumbled, his eyes still fixed on an old picture. "She would have loved you so much, you little rascal." Lucky didn't respond, just let out a soft whine, its tail gently thumping the rug. One morning, William was retying a watering hose when Lucky trotted up triumphantly, carrying one of his gardening gloves in its mouth. "Hey, up to your tricks again. Give that back." It dropped the glove right into the compost bin, then sat down, tilting its head as if to say, "I'm helping, right?" William frowned, then burst out laughing. "You're a sneaky one. You're definitely not a farm dog. You're a four-legged comedian." Word of the one-legged old man and his devoted stray dog spread through town. People started stopping by more often, bringing apple pies, a few bundles of firewood, or just to sit quietly on the porch listening to William's stories. No one asked too many questions. They just looked at Lucky lying with his head on William's lap and knew some things didn't need explaining. One afternoon, William sat watching the apple tree behind his house bloom with white blossoms. He said softly, "There were times I thought my life was over, but then you came, Lucky. You made this house smile again." Lucky looked up, nudged its head into his hand, its eyes reflecting a silent tenderness. And in that moment, there was no longer just an old man with one leg and a once-abandoned dog. There were just two friends writing a new chapter of their lives together, where silence was the deepest gratitude. That summer, the weather was unusually dry. Hot winds blew for weeks on end, sucking moisture from the land and turning forest leaves into tinderboxes. William felt something was off, not because of the weather forecast, but because of the air it carried, a faint burnt smell, the scent of dry woods and risk. And then, one early August afternoon, the western sky turned a fiery red-gray. A pillar of black smoke coiled up in the distance, and warning sirens wailed from the town fire station. Wildfire. The ferocious flames devoured everything in their path, heading straight for the hills towards where William and Lucky lived. William packed as quickly as he could, his prosthetic leg making everything terrifyingly slow. As he stuffed belongings into a bag, he told Lucky, "Stay close, fella. Don't run off." But Lucky wasn't there. When he called, only the wind answered. A moment later, he saw it bolting from the tree line, heading for the dirt road leading down to town, moving like an arrow. "Lucky, where are you going?" William yelled, filled with worry and confusion. But it didn't stop. Lucky had sensed the danger, and it knew what it had to do. About an hour later, as William was being evacuated by a rescue truck, he heard many townspeople mentioning Lucky's name. "Some dog just warned us about the fire at the edge of the woods. It barked like crazy until everyone woke up." It was that dog that led old blind Mrs. Hazel all the way to the main road, otherwise she wouldn't have made it out. What kind of dog is that smart? It saved a bunch of kids playing hide-and-seek nearby. William just smiled, a mix of pride and astonishment. I know him. As the fire spread, firefighters worked through the night. The small town was enveloped in smoke and pervasive anxiety. But amidst it all, people still saw Lucky wearing a red bandana. Someone had hastily tied it on, darting around like lightning, barking loudly to signal when fire crept close to homes, guiding panicked elderly folks, or leading rescue teams precisely to where people were trapped. A firefighter, his face smudged with soot, said breathlessly, "That dog wasn't scared of anything." It was as if he knew who needed help, as if he understood how dangerous the situation was. Unbelievable. When the fire was brought under control after 3 relentless days, dozens of homes were saved from complete destruction. Most importantly, no one died. Lucky returned to William grimy, fur smoke-stained, a slight burn on his front paw from a burning branch that grazed him while he shielded a child who had fallen in the smoke. William sat beneath a charred tree, holding him close, stroking his ash-colored fur. "You really are lucky, but this time the whole town was lucky to have you." A week later, at a community meeting to assess the damage and thank those who had helped, the town mayor stepped onto the makeshift wooden podium, motioning for silence. "Today, we not only thank our brave firefighters and the volunteers who fought the blaze, but also a special friend, a member of our community, who, though he cannot speak, acted more than anyone." He bent down. Lucky walked forward wearing his familiar red bandana, eyes sparkling in the sunlight. The crowd erupted in applause, cheers echoing through the valley. A child, perhaps the one Lucky had saved, shouted, "Lucky the hero." William wiped his glasses, trying to hold back his emotions. He looked at Lucky, then at the townspeople cheering for his dog. "Well, I thought you just knew how to steal snacks and sleep on the couch." He chuckled, his voice thick with emotion. "Turns out you're the superhero of this whole town." Lucky barked as if in reply. "You don't know the half of it, old man." From that day on, people called Lucky by a new name full of affection and respect, the hero of the hills. But to William, he was still Lucky, his companion, the lost and injured dog, and the reason he kept going every day. And the story of the four-legged hero, along with his one-legged owner, spread far beyond the Wyoming hills. Photos and videos of Lucky during the wildfire, along with a touching news article, quickly appeared on social media and major news channels. Among those who saw the story was a man on the East Coast, William's only son. He read the article again and again, his eyes fixed on the image of his aging but courageous father and the dog he'd never met. The regret of infrequent calls, even fewer visits, suddenly surged stronger than ever. He immediately picked up the phone. "Dad, it's John. I just read the news. Are you okay?" "How's Lucky doing?" John's voice was filled with worry and emotion. William, hearing his son's voice, couldn't hide his joy. He recounted everything, his voice hoarse, but full of pride about Lucky. "He's the bravest creature I've ever known, son. He's my lucky charm." John listened, then took a deep breath. "Dad, I'm coming home. I'm bringing your granddaughter, my daughter, to visit you and Lucky. We'll come to that log cabin." "Okay, Dad." William smiled a rare, radiant smile. "I'll be waiting, son." William's life, which he thought had closed, now not only opened a new chapter, but also promised a meaningful reunion, all thanks to a stray dog and a moment of courage. The weeks following the wildfire passed slowly for William, not because he was lonely, but because he was counting down the days. John's phone call, with the promise of a visit, breathed new life into his world. With the help of a few kind neighbors, William cleaned his house and tidied the garden, preparing for his guests. Lucky, now a local celebrity, remained as lively and mischievous as ever, but he too seemed to sense William's eagerness, often running out to the dirt road in front of the house, looking expectantly. Then the day finally arrived. One late autumn afternoon, as the leaves had turned a vibrant red and the air grew crisp, an old, well-traveled pickup truck pulled up to the weathered wooden fence. William, sitting on his porch with Lucky at his feet, suddenly stood tall, his heart pounding. A tall, rugged man with dark hair and a familiar smile stepped out of the truck. It was John, his son. Behind him was a girl of about 8 with golden blonde hair and wide, curious eyes shyly peeking from behind her father's legs. This was William's granddaughter, whom he only knew from old photographs. Dad John quickly strode forward, embracing William tightly. The warm, strong hug, after so many years apart, brought tears to William's eyes. "I'm sorry, Dad. I got so caught up I forgot what was most important." William patted his son's back gently, his eyes red-rimmed. "It's good you're back, John. Just being home is enough." Lucky, initially wary, took a hesitant step back upon seeing the strangers. He looked at John with a scrutinizing gaze, then back at William as if seeking approval. John knelt down slowly, extending his hand. "Hello, hero dog," he said softly, his voice gentle. Lucky sniffed John's hand for a moment, then tentatively gave a gentle lick. Then John led the little girl closer to William. "Dad, this is Lily." Lily looked up at her grandpa, her eyes full of curiosity. William smiled kindly, extending his hand. "Hello, Lily. You've grown so big." Lily lightly touched his hand, then her eyes were immediately drawn to Lucky. She gently bent down, reaching out her hand. "Hi, Lucky," Lily whispered, her voice clear as a bell. "My dad says you're a hero." Lucky looked at Lily, tilting his head slightly. He gently drooped his ears, then gave a soft tail wag. Seeing this, Lily giggled. "You're not a superhero, you're a super dog," she exclaimed, then sat down on the ground, beginning to pet Lucky's fur. The dog, initially a bit reserved, quickly rubbed his head against Lily's hand, gently licking her cheek. "Oh, he likes me," Lily cheered, looking up at her grandpa. "Grandpa, can he sleep with me?" William chuckled heartily. "Well, you'll have to ask Lucky if he agrees to that." 3 generations, a man and a dog, sat together on William's porch. Lily's bright laughter echoed across the yard, dispelling the usual quiet. John spoke of his life in the city of his work. William, with Lucky resting against his leg, recounted his days on the farm life with Lucky and the terrifying wildfire. Each time William mentioned Lucky's name or spoke of his deeds, the dog would perk up his black eyes full of curious expression, as if listening to what his owner was saying about him, sometimes even giving a soft rumble of agreement. John listened, sometimes his eyes crinkling with regret, but also filled with pride for his father. Lucky, after his initial shyness, was now completely at ease. He lay beside Lily, letting her hug and pet him. When William and John talked, Lucky would lift his head, listen, then rest his head on Lily's lap, as if he too was an indispensable part of this family conversation. He was no longer just the lone stray dog or just William's friend. Now Lucky was truly a member of the family, a part of this reunion. That night, after a simple but warm dinner, John and Lily slept in the long unused guest room. William lay in his bed, listening to Lucky's soft snores at his feet and his son's quiet conversation with his granddaughter from the next room. His heart was filled with a sense of peace and contentment he had thought he would never feel again. Lucky had not only saved William, not only saved the townspeople, but he had also brought William's family back to him. He had helped William realize that life still held endless things to love and cherish. The second day of Lily's stay at the farm was filled with exploration and excitement. She adapted quickly to country life, exploring every nook and cranny of the garden, and especially never leaving Lucky's side. John was helping William fix a fence knocked down by a storm, while Lily and Lucky ventured off to explore the small creek that ran through the end of the farm. It was a gentle stream, its water clear and babbling over smooth pebbles. Lily loved sitting by the bank, floating small leaves downstream and imagining them as tiny sailboats. Lucky, with his protective instincts and special bond with the girl, always followed Lily closely, his warm brown eyes fixed on her, occasionally dipping his nose into the cool water. That day, Lily was engrossed in chasing a colorful butterfly flitting over the slippery rocks near the creek bank. Unfortunately, a rock she had just stepped on wobbled, and Lily lost her balance, slipping and falling into the water. The creek, though not overly wide, had surprisingly deep sections and a swift current. Her straw hat was immediately swept away, and Lily screamed in panic as the cold water pulled her downstream. Lucky, lying nearby, heard Lily's desperate cry. Without a moment's hesitation, the dog plunged into the creek. The strong current tossed Lucky's body around, but he still struggled to swim towards the floundering Lily. Lily tried to cling to a slippery rock, but the current was too strong for her small fingers to hold on. She began to truly panic as she felt the cold water pulling her under. Just then, Lucky reached Lily. The dog quickly gripped the hem of her shirt with his strong but incredibly gentle jaws. Lily clung tightly to Lucky's neck, crying and trying to stay upright. Lucky began to struggle against the swift current, pulling Lily with him. This was an incredibly difficult task. The strong water seemed determined to sweep them both away. But with extraordinary bravery and love for the little girl, Lucky used all his strength to slowly bring Lily towards the bank. William and John, hearing Lily's screams and Lucky's continuous alarmed barks, rushed towards the creek. When they saw Lily struggling in the water and Lucky bravely fighting to pull her to shore, their hearts stopped. Finally, after relentless effort, Lucky managed to bring Lily close to the bank. John quickly jumped in and scooped his trembling daughter onto the shore. William hugged Lily tightly, checking her for injuries. Fortunately, apart from being wet and a bit cold, Lily was not seriously hurt. She threw her arms around Lucky, tears still streaming down her face. "Thank you." Lucky William and John looked at each other, their eyes filled with gratitude and pride for the brave dog. Lucky lay panting on the bank, his fur soaked, but his eyes still showed worry for Lily. From that day on, the memory of Lily falling into the creek and being saved by Lucky became a touching and unforgettable story in William's family. Lily grew to love and trust Lucky even more, and the dog remained devoted to her like a loyal guardian. The incident was not just a dangerous moment, but also the clearest proof of the strong love and special bond between the girl and the family's heroic dog. For the first time in many years, William believed that the bond between the three generations was being reconnected, not by flowery words or belated apologies, but by the silent act of a dog who was once wild and was now the heart of the whole family. Every summer, the small town in Wyoming held an outdoor festival, flags strung overhead, pastry stands, country music drifting from wooden speakers, and families setting up chairs in the shade, soaking in the golden sunshine. But this year, the festival had something special. On the signboard in front of the town square was a handwritten message, honoring Lucky Hero of the town. Parade at 10 a.m. speech by Mr. William. That morning, the entire town gathered in the small square. Lucky, freshly groomed with a brand new red silk bandana around his neck, walked beside Lily. She held his leash like a confident companion, smiling brightly under her wide-brimmed hat, her cheeks rosy from the sun. William sat on a wooden chair at the front, leaning on his cane, watching them both with eyes that couldn't be more radiant, a profound sense of pride swelling in his heart. The crowd erupted in cheers as Lily and Lucky led the parade behind them. A children's drum corps floats from local residents and a few ponies adorned with red and white ribbons. Lucky strode proudly, but every now and then he'd look around a bit bewildered by the crowd's attention, then turn his head to check on Lily as if asking, "You okay, little one? Why are they cheering so much?" Lily would squeeze the leash tightly, softly whispering, "You're a hero." And Lucky seemed to understand, lifting his head high again and walking on. When the parade ended, everyone gathered in front of the makeshift stage. William was invited up. The entire crowd fell silent, the wind rustling the flags gently. He stood slowly, his cane tapping against the wooden platform, but his voice rang out clearly, warm, and deep. "Someone once told me that dogs only live a part of our lives, but we are their whole life." He looked down at Lucky, who was now sitting at the foot of the stage, Lily leaning against his back. "But for me, Lucky isn't just a part of my life. He's the reason I keep living. He saved me. He saved my granddaughter. And more than anything, he brought my family back together." William paused, reaching up to wipe the corner of his eye. A brief silence fell over the square. John, standing below the stage, quietly brushed away a tear rolling down his cheek. He understood the meaning of his father's words better than anyone. Maybe to others he's just a dog, but to me, to Lily, and to all of us, he's a symbol of loyalty, of forgiveness, and of unconditional love. The applause was thunderous, long, and unending. At noon, the three generations sat under a tree behind the town hall, sharing pastries and lemonade. John had packed his small suitcase. Today was the day they had to return to the city. Lily sat clutching Lucky tightly, her eyes sad. "I don't want to leave here, Grandpa," she whispered, burying her face in the dog's fur. William stroked his granddaughter's hair. "I know, but the city needs you too. School friends." "What about Lucky?" William looked at the dog dozing at Lily's feet. "He'll always be here, waiting for you. Every summer, every holiday, he won't forget you." Lily pursed her lips, then bent down and whispered something into Lucky's ear, a private farewell. Lucky didn't answer, just let out a soft whine and licked her cheek very gently. John squeezed his father's hand. "Thank you for showing Lily where she belongs. Thank you, Dad, for helping me understand more about courage and love." William replied, his voice thick with emotion, his eyes full of tenderness. "Son, this time. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for letting me be a father again. As the car rolled out of town, Lucky stood in the middle of the red dirt path in front of the house, watching them go. Lily pressed her face against the back window, waving continuously the figures of the dog and her grandpa slowly growing smaller. William stood beside Lucky, gripping his cane tightly. A gentle breeze swept across the prairie, carrying the scent of dry grass and the fading sound of the car horn. "Well," he said softly, gently stroking Lucky's head. "This is sadder than I thought it would be." Lucky sniffed, then sat close to his leg, leaning heavily against William's pants. They both watched the long road until the car disappeared over the hill, leaving an emptiness in the air. The festival ended, but the feeling of love and connection remained. And there, in a peaceful countryside, an old man and a dog who had both known loss continued to live. Not loudly, not tragically, simply together, writing the final pages of a story about loyalty, love, and the luck found amidst life's complexities. Late that spring, the last Indian paintbrush blooms lingered on the hillsides, their vibrant beauty barely unfurled before the sky turned dark, heavy with oppressive gray clouds. The local radio station broadcasted continuously, "A major storm is forming over the western plains, expected to make landfall Saturday night. Residents are advised to stay indoors and prepare." Townspeople began preparations early, reinforcing roofs, boarding up windows, stocking up on water and food. But for William, bad weather was just part of farm life. He had lived through dozens of storms. Just a little thing. "Lucky," he said, pulling the tarp over the goat shed, his voice as calm as ever. "We'll be fine." Lucky didn't respond with a bark or a playful tail wag, but his eyes more uneasy than usual. He followed William closely, not his usual playful self, occasionally nudging his nose into William's leg as a silent reminder. He sensed something else, not just the approaching storm, but a weakness in his old friend. Saturday night, the storm hit. The wind began to howl like 1,000 hungry wolves. Wooden planks creaked, and the tin roof shrieked like tearing metal. The power went out. The entire house was plunged into thick darkness, lit only by the flickering, unsteady glow of an oil lamp swaying with each gust of wind. William sat by the window, wrapped in a blanket, coughing in ragged bursts. All day he hadn't felt well. His head was spinning, his heart pounded with a heavy thud, and cold sweat beaded on his skin. He thought it was just fatigue from the changing season. But no. The dull ache in his chest wouldn't stop, like an invisible vice tightening. William tried to stand up to pour water, but his hands trembled uncontrollably. The glass slipped from his weak fingers, shattering on the wooden floor, its sharp crash piercing through the howling storm. Lucky immediately leaped up, barking loudly, his barks filled with alarm. He ran around William, whimpering, nudging William's hand fiercely, then darted towards the door. William tried to reassure him, his voice broken, weak. "It's okay, I'm just a little tired." But his voice faded, and William collapsed onto the chair, his eyes closed. Lucky barked frantically, his barks hoarse with desperation. He ran around the house, scratching at the door, whimpering piteously. No one was there. No phone signal. Only the howling storm outside, swallowing every other sound. And then Lucky did the unbelievable. He mustered all his strength, bit hard at the wooden latch, and pulled the bolt open. Then he plunged out into the torrential rain and bullet-like wind. Lucky's small body was buffeted by the gusts, but he stubbornly pressed on towards town, nearly 2 miles away across flooded fields that turned into small rivers, through roaring gales and lightning tearing across the night sky. He had once run for his own survival. Today he ran to save a life. About an hour later, a family near town, trying to brace their windows, suddenly heard frantic barking and insistent scratching at their door. When they opened it, Lucky, soaking wet, shivering from cold and exhaustion, covered in mud, stood there. His eyes pleaded, barking incessantly and turning his head back towards William's farm. They recognized him. "It's Lucky, William's dog. Something's wrong." The man immediately got in his pickup truck, defying the storm. On the way to the farm, he called the emergency services. They found William lying motionless on the chair, his lips pale, his breathing terrifyingly shallow, but alive. Lucky, because he hadn't hesitated for a second. Hours later, William lay in the town hospital. He woke to the faint light of a nurse's flashlight, murmuring, "You're okay, William. A heart condition, but we got to you in time. Lucky saved you." William gripped the nurse's hand. The dog. Lucky. She nodded, her eyes full of admiration. "He saved you." People say he ran through the storm all the way to someone's door, signaling something was wrong. Never seen a dog like it. William closed his eyes, a faint but deeply contented smile on his face. That little guy never abandoned me. The storm eventually passed, but from that night on, the townspeople no longer called Lucky the hero dog. They called him the heart of the town, because if William's heart had nearly stopped, it was Lucky's beat that kept everything alive, keeping love and hope burning in that small town. In the middle of that summer, when the Indian paintbrush and countless other wildflowers bloomed across the hillsides, painting the Wyoming landscape in its most vibrant colors, William quietly passed away in his sleep. No last words, no cry of pain. He left as he had lived his final years, peacefully, simply, and complete. William had found his serenity in the small cabin beside his loyal four-legged friend. At dawn, as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the window curtains, Lucky suddenly let out a long, mournful howl that echoed through the valley. It was a howl of heartbreaking sorrow, of an unnamed loss, making the entire world seem to fall silent with only the wind gently rustling the leaves. Then he lay down next to William, his head resting on his chest, as always, motionless, not barking, not leaving, as if protecting him from the final coldness of death. His brown eyes remained wide open, as if wanting to forever engrave the image of the friend who had stayed by his side through so many storms of life. When neighbors came to visit and discovered him, they stood in silence for a long time before the sight. No one dared separate them immediately. They understood it was a sacred moment, the final testament to a great friendship. They buried William beneath the old cottonwood tree on the hilltop, where the wind always sang through the leaves, where he once said, "If I ever have to leave, I want to hear the wind here one last time." From that day on, Lucky went to the grave every morning. He lay quietly by the headstone, his deep eyes gazing into the distance, as if waiting for a familiar figure to appear on the horizon. In the evening, he would return to the cabin, waiting by the door as if William had just gone for a stroll and would return at any moment. Whether it was the scorching summer sun or sudden rains, he remained there. John William's son had returned to town for his father's funeral. He saw Lucky, understood his pain, and tried to take him back to the city. "You can't stay here forever," Lucky John said gently, stroking the gray fur. But Lucky just whimpered, his eyes fixed resolutely on the hill where William rested. Then he turned back, lying down by the grave as a silent affirmation. John understood. He knew Lucky had chosen to stay, chosen to be a loyal guardian of the grave until the very end. A living monument to loyalty, a silent sentinel for his departed friend. Nearly 3 months later, on an early autumn morning, as the maple leaves began to turn golden and the morning dew still clung to the grass, Lucky didn't wake up. He was found curled up beside William's old jacket, his eyes closed, his face peaceful, as if dreaming of a vast field where he could run free again. And there his old friend was waiting, a warm smile on his face, whistling his name to call him home. They buried Lucky next to William, right beneath that same cottonwood tree. The entire town came. No one spoke a word, just quietly placed wildflowers on the two graves as a final tribute. On a small stone, a simple but profound inscription was carved, "Lucky loyal to the end." And then people began to tell stories they only dared to whisper in the long winter nights. On full moon nights, when the wind whispered softly over the hill and the prairie glowed under the silver moonlight, sometimes people said they heard a familiar whistle exactly like the one William used to call Lucky home. Some hikers, lost in thick fog, claimed to hear a deep, reassuring bark in the wind, guiding them back to the familiar trail. But no one ever saw the dog. Only 2 moss-covered graves lay quietly beneath the ancient cottonwood tree on a windswept hill. And sometimes at sunset, people say they saw an old man with silver hair limping across the golden fields, a gray dog gracefully walking beside him. Then both vanished, into the wind, merging with the vibrant Wyoming sunset.